Hi, I'm Reid Peterson, and welcome to Grief Refuge. If this is your first time listening, you're in for a treat. Here at Grief Refuge, we hold sacred space for your grief. This is where it gets honored, and you're invited to explore the deeper understandings of your process and grief journey. You'll find Grief Refuge to be different from other grief-related podcasts. Rather than talking about what's superficial in grief, we go much deeper. Grief can be so emotional and overwhelming. And my intention with this podcast is to be a soothing voice and help you navigate this terrain of emptiness, loneliness, uncertainty, and other things that create hurt and pain. I appreciate your listenership, regardless whether this is your first or 150th time listening. I sincerely hope you feel more comforted, supported, and cared for as you take another step on this journey. Because of the depth and nature of this topic, it may be more beneficial to not multitask while you're listening. Rather than staying busy and distracted of distractions, I invite you to use this time for self-care and reflection. Use this time to relax and allow your grief-related feelings to run their course. Use this time to mourn your loss. In addition to what you're about to hear, I also invite you to download the Grief Refuge app. On the app, there are more stories, reflections, perspective, and insights, all for healing and processing grief. Grief Refuge is a free download and it's easy to find. Just search Grief Refuge on whatever app store you use. Now that we've got our foundation set, let's move on to today's topic. Chances are there was a time in your life when you inherited something from a loved one who had passed away. The object was very sentimental and it meant a lot to you, and it meant so much to your special person. But after time, and sometimes after wear and tear of the object, you may have lost an attachment to the object itself, or things may have become more to maintain than what you can handle. This is common, and if this resonates, this podcast episode is for you. I want to mention first that all the content created for this podcast wasn't done only by myself. I had a great colleague and friend named Belinda Kock, who's a fellow grief companion at freetogrieve.com. And that's free, and then the number 2, and then the word grieve.com. Belinda and I had very meaningful conversations when we created this original article turned into a podcast, and we're honored to share it with you today. One little semantic note before I begin is I just want to say that in the article we wrote about the term called linking objects. When you hear the word linking object or words, they are interchangeable with sentimental objects. Linking objects are the possessions that keep you connected to your special person. So now that that's defined, let's move on to the more helpful information and get into the heart of this matter. I wear the chain I forged in life, replied the ghost. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. And that quote is from A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So these famous words have always haunted Belinda, and yes, the pun was intended on that. The idea of holding on to things so tightly in life that they can chain you down and prevent you from living to your fullest joy is heartbreaking to her. In A Christmas Carol, Jacob Marley's chain was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses, rotten steel. These were the things that he coveted to the point that they became his undoing. You may be asking, what in the world does this all have to do with linking objects and sentimental objects that keep someone connected to a loved one that has died? Well, Belinda would tell you, nothing if you have a healthy connection with the objects. But if holding on to something is no longer about preserving the memory of your loved one, and it's more about holding on to something for the sake of holding on to it, you're definitely encouraged to keep listening. A 900-pound linking object. Now, when Reid was a kid, it was a special treat to go for a ride on Warren's motorcycle. Warren's my stepfather. You may have heard me talk about him before. He died in 2016. From the moment Warren entered my life, at the young age of 3, he had a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. I thought his black Sportster was the coolest, probably because it was the smallest of his bikes, and I thought it could go the fastest. Warren was a Harley-Davidson man. He owned 3 different Harleys in the 37 years that he was actively involved as a father figure for me. Throughout those wonderful decades of life, he and my mom took a lot of vacations and did a lot of motorcycle touring. Many of those trips and rides were some of the fondest memories that they shared together. When Warren was diagnosed with cancer in 2008, he kept a positive attitude, and he affirmed that he was going to live another 30 or more years. I believed him. He had a very strong will. After all the treatments and the additional diseases he developed as side effects began to wear down his spirit, he and my mom began to make arrangements to set up a will and get their affairs in order. I remember talking to them about Warren's bike. At the time, he had a 1998 Harley-Davidson Ultra Glide, and it was a 95th anniversary edition. They asked if I would be interested in taking ownership of it when he passed. I was almost shocked because this was such a part of Warren's life. The only way I could respond was by saying I would be honored. It's an understatement to say that this bike was a big part of Warren's life and identity. After he died, my mom had the bike towed into the shop to repair and restore it. While Warren was sick, it had sat in the garage for 4 years. Sadly, Warren just didn't have the strength to hold it up. The bike was restored and we towed it from Minnesota all the way to California, and there I took ownership of it. I remember looking at it when we got it off the trailer, and I told myself, take care of this beauty. This is what's left of Warren. I rode it once a week for the first year I owned it. Every time I got on the bike, I felt like Warren was right there with me. It was a very special time. I'd fire up that bike and head for a curvy country road. That's where I'd taken the beautiful scenery, and I felt so confident and so sure that Warren's spirit, right along with me, was filled with joy. Then, for the full year of 2019, I was a full-time motorcycle commuter. That feeling of being with Warren wore off, and my mind began to focus more on the dangers of riding a motorcycle, especially in my area of California. Everyday commutes to work and other places, for me, became more about survival and remaining accident-free. During those times, I had many conversations with my wife about what to do with the bike. I tapped into my truth, and what it told me was that I was now scared. I didn't trust the other drivers on the road. I was seeing too many people driving and texting, and for me personally, there were more close calls than I could count. In December of 2019, my wife leased a car, and at that time, with us having a second car, I stopped riding the bike. The feeling was bittersweet. I felt much more safe in a car that had airbags and metal around me, but there was also a part of me that felt like I betrayed Warren. So to this day, Warren's bike continues to sit in the driveway. There are several days that I look at it and I tell myself, I need to ride this thing. I owe it to Warren, and I need to preserve his legacy. How do linking objects keep the memory of a loved one going? When you hold a linking object in your hand, you're reminded of the person that made that object special in the first place. This makes linking objects very important in grief. They sometimes fill a void for the connection to your special person. Linking objects help you feel close to the person you miss so much. Linking objects are often defined as something owned by the person you lost. That's not always the case, though. They can be unowned objects that bring up memories of special bonds or attachments you had with your special person. For example, random pennies found in public places are linking objects for me, Reid's maternal grandmother. They help connect me to my grandma Mary Lou, who passed in 1996. She always used to say, "Find a penny, pick it up, and all day long you'll have good luck." Without the penny as a linking object, the memories of my fond grandmother, they'd be lost. So for Belinda, special linking objects are found in fondue pots. And let that be some foreshadowing for more about that in a bit. When linking objects lose their significance over time, it's considered healthy and part of accepting the new reality associated with your loss. Some linking objects are held onto longer than others, and some are held onto for generations. The timing and importance of linking objects depends on what the object is and the significance it played in your relationship to the person you lost. So this next question is like one of the thesis questions that Belinda and I had when creating this original article. The question is, can linking objects be harmful to the healing and grief process? Sometimes, linking objects are harmful in that they perpetuate emotions that feel more hurtful. When linking objects no longer fulfill the purpose of connecting you to your loved one, it can be easy to feel guilty, have self-judgment, or even shame. These feelings are common because part of you wants to move on with life, but part of you still feels the need to honor and or preserve the memory of your loved one. Remember Belinda's note about fondue pots? Here's her story as an example for how linking objects can become more harmful than helpful. So anytime Belinda sees a fondue pot at a thrift store or a yard sale, she automatically thinks of her stepdad, Pierre, and the 40-year-long escargot cheese fondue Christmas Eve tradition her family has. The tradition becomes problematic when she opens up her hall closet and she sees so many, too many, fondue pots that have collected since her stepdad died 8 years ago. For Belinda, traditions and rituals are an important part of life. They bring peace into a world that is full of chaos. When she takes communion at church the first Sunday of the month, it helps her connect with her faith and her fellow Christians. When she wakes up in the morning and makes the perfect cup of coffee, it helps her get centered for the day. And when the family comes together for escargot and fondue on Christmas Eve, it reminds her of the many happy times in her childhood. So it's natural that those fondue pots would bring a sense of peace. But because she's aware of the tendency to be what some call a pack rat, she knows that she has to do a healthy purge of things and let go of some of the many fondue pots she owns. But what if someone just cannot allow themselves to let go of something because they remind them so much of the person who died? What if this holding on to the past has become self-destructive, even to the point that the items are taking over their home and lives? And this doesn't have to be for you. This could be someone else who's a loved one that you're very concerned about. But it also may be you that has acknowledged that these objects around your home, they may have become more overwhelming, that it's causing you not only anxiety, but embarrassment or other hurtful feelings. So what purpose is your linking object fulfilling? Grief can be complex and overwhelming. Sometimes survival is the only goal. When grief becomes more manageable, it's healthy to ask yourself on a consistent basis, what purpose is my linking object fulfilling? Your answer may surprise you. There are times when a linking object may be thought to keep a connection to a loved one who has passed, but it may also feed an emotional behavior that can keep you stuck in grief. Linking objects help to keep memories alive. They remind you of your special person, their smile, the way they laughed, their jokes, their quirks. It's hard to let go of things like that. It's hard to think that if you let go and move on, you may forget about what made them so special. When you're in a position of using linking objects to deny the reality about your loss, things may get problematic. One of the more common ways this happens is when someone dies and their family leaves their room exactly how it was for the rest of the time they own the house. It's okay to take your time to sort through things, but if everything in the room is there to remove their death, the linking objects are more being used for the purpose of denial. This holding on and denying death can stir up other emotions that may make grief feel more painful. Many linking objects are used to honor the person who has passed. A special watch or ring can be quite sentimental and honoring when worn and or talked about with other loved ones. One question you may want to explore on an occasional basis is the linking object helping me honor my loved one? If your answer is yes, use that linking object to share stories about the special person that you feel connected to. But if your answer is no, it may be time to consider the option of passing it on to someone else or letting it go. This can be a hard decision to make, but it can also be helpful for the healing process. Another question to ask yourself on an occasional basis is, do I need this linking object to stay connected to my loved one? Since this question is phrased in a way that indicates either a yes or no answer, your response can help dictate the type of purpose that the object is fulfilling. Again, if your answer is yes, use the object to share more stories about the special person who the object helps you feel connected to. If your answer is no, consider passing the item on or letting it go. Although this can be very difficult, it can be helpful for the healing process. It's important to take a moment every now and then to gauge how you feel about the object itself. Some linking objects can take a lot of time or cost a lot of money to keep current, working, or even clean. Practicalities such as these are factors that can impact a decision, and they're also just as important as other factors that could be considered more sentimental. What to do when linking objects no longer fulfill their purpose? Although there's no set time to hang on to linking objects, there is the possibility of times when these objects can hold you back from healing and moving forward in grief. Belinda keeps thinking about when her youngest daughter would not let go of a certain dress she loved. She loved that dress so much that she could tell you all the fun things that she did while wearing it. The list would be quite long. None of the typical, how about we donate it so some other little girl can enjoy it, or it's really too small for you to wear and too big for your dolls, so maybe we should donate it. None of these tricks would work with her as a kid. She just wasn't letting go of that beautiful purple dress. But then, Belinda's daughter started doing this with other items. Dolls, toys, and other clothes. She could recall a memory so quickly when she held that item, but the holding on to it created a big problem. Her room became overfilled with stuff, and she would never play in there. So that's when Belinda had to do some creative mom/counselor work with her daughter. She told her what a great storyteller she was, and she told her how much she enjoyed her telling her about things. Belinda told her daughter that she thinks others would love to hear those stories too. But there was no way that she could bring all that stuff out into public. So Belinda asked her to take a picture of the items she loved the most. And according to her daughter, it was everything. The plan was to start with her dress, and then they would take pictures and put it in an album so she could use them as illustrations to tell her stories. Belinda was then able to explain to her daughter how memories work, which in turn help her let go and donate lots of her possessions. She even donated the all-important purple dress. It took them a whole week and lots of mom patience to get through all the stories. But now that her daughter's 14 years old, she actually creates stories and videos with her own art. This is just one way to get creative for how to start the process of removing linking objects that have lost their purpose. What are some other ways you can think of that will help you start break free from your chains? Could it be setting a date to start and asking a trusted friend to help you? Maybe it will take you setting up an appointment with a grief support specialist to walk you through the process. However you decide to move forward with letting go of linking objects, we encourage you to find support. Having that trustworthy person to keep you accountable and feel safe is just as important as any other part of the journey. In conclusion, linking objects are the things that help keep the memory of a loved one going. They help you feel a special connection to someone who has died. Like life itself, linking objects have a beginning and an end. If you have linking objects that are contributing to feeling stuck in grief, it may be time to ask yourself if the objects are no longer fulfilling a purpose. This can be a difficult thing to discern. However, the stories and the questions to ask yourself here throughout this podcast episode can help. It's our hope that you are able to do what you need to do in order to feel like your grief journey has momentum and movement. Sometimes the support from a grief support specialist may be needed. Other times, the letting go of the linking object itself is all you need. Well, I want to thank you for listening in today, and I want to thank Belinda Kock for an amazing contribution to our original article. It's such an honor to hold space for your grief in this healing process. If you found this episode to be helpful, let us know by rating and reviewing the Grief Refuge podcast, or send us a message at griefrefuge.com. Before saying goodbye today, I want to remind you about downloading the Grief Refuge app. Go grab that app for more grief support. Grief Refuge is a pretty amazing tool to have when grief hits you hard. It's free to download, and you can find it on your phone's app store. So that's going to do it today. Please check out my friend Belinda Kock's website. It's freetogrieve.com, and that's FREE with the number 2, grieve, GRIEVE.com. And take care of yourself. Keep honoring your grief, be kind to yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.